Hi, welcome again to the Cookery School at Daylesford on Facebook. So tonight we're cooking a lovely little dish, this kind of vegetable and seasonal cheese parcel. I don't know if seasonal cheese sounds a little bit strange to people, but there are certain times of year that are better to be eating certain cheeses. So at this time of year when the cows are eating plenty of grass and their milk's delicious, if we take a relatively fresh cheese, that's when we're looking to be eating a cheese that's from around now. So hopefully you're all as set as I am and you've got everything ready that was on your little kind of prep list. So we've got all of our kind of vegetables out. Now I might have added some extra ones because I'm pretty lucky working on the farm to have so much on the doorstep. I've got my herbs, I've got my chard. Now for those of you that didn't know what it was, hopefully you do now and you've managed to find some. And we've got some nice big leaves, yeah? These will be easier to wrap our little kind of parcel with. Then pans are ready to go. I've also got a bowl of cold water because when we blanch our leaves we need to cool them down. Then your oven's on and we're ready to go. So another thing we're going to do tonight is I'll cover a few knife skills. I don't know how you're going to find that, and I don't know whether you've got one of these ready to go, but I'll definitely be using a cook's knife to work with to prep these vegetables with, but we'll go over that when it comes to it. So I think the first thing for us to do is start cooking, and it's this lovely chard. Now if your chard has got nice big fat stems like this, they are more than edible, they're really delicious when you kind of gently cook them, but for this dish they're not going to work because they're going to be a little bit too rigid even when we kind of cook them down. So we will just get rid of those, and you see they're quite easy to snap off. And just put those to one side while we bring some water to the boil. So get your pan. I prefer to use cold water, and that way it's not kind of tainted with anything. Then you're going to put this on a nice strong heat. When we bring something to the boil, you're always going to do that nice and quickly. But otherwise, it's whenever it comes to kind of pan cookery, you're always looking to get the pan hot first and then maybe turn it down to the temperature that you want after. So just while
someone's just saying, could you speak up?
Yes. So sorry you can't hear me too well. I'll make sure I talk a bit more that way at you. So we've got our pan of water on. This is coming up to the boil on a nice strong heat. We've got our cold water in a bowl ready to refresh our leaves in. Now when it comes to refresh the leaves and stop them cooking, you're probably better off with a little bit of ice in the water, but for me it's not too important with this small amount of leaves. If I was cooking for a lot of people, there'd definitely be ice in that water. So now we've got our leaves prepped, the water's coming up to the boil. We're looking to just kind of start preparing the rest of the dish while we've got things in front of us. So I'm just using a kind of small tart case today. Now actually there's no even need to use one of these. You can wrap it all up and then wrap it in a piece of greaseproof paper. So if you find that you're doing this and you've not got one of these, don't worry too much at all. But what I need to do with this is grease it firstly. Whenever greasing a tin for anything, you're going to be using butter. So the butter that we're using is from our herd of dairy cows that are actually just behind the camera. So I know exactly where this comes from, I know how delicious it is. But when we grease a tin with butter, it means that the butter will hang on to the tin. Whereas if we're using vegetable oil, all the vegetable oil does when it hits the oven is as it warms up, it all drops down to the bottom and things will stick on the side quite a lot. So I've got a nice amount of grease on there. You can see it's not caked with butter, but it will depend on your tin as to whether things are going to stick. So I'll show you a little trick for if you've got tins that things stick to. So your greaseproof paper, yeah, or your baking parchment, whatever you have. Now mine's already in a circle, probably a little bit too big for what I need. So to line the bottom of this is actually a very easy trick to save us getting out a pencil and a pair of scissors. So take your sheet of greaseproof paper, it doesn't matter if it's round or whether it's rectangle, but you're going to fold it in half, and then you're going to fold that in half again. Then this is the centre of our paper where I'm kind of pinching at. Then once you've got that little pinch, you're just going to fold it over and in towards itself into a little cone, and do that a couple of times until it's nice and tight. So now I can actually cut a circle out of this quite easily. So to cut the circle out, there's the same size as our tin. You need to hold the centre of the paper to the centre of the tin and pinch the edge just within the tin, and that way when I cut here it should be the same size as this. Now if you folded it wrong you might end up with a snowflake or a little man or something, but don't worry about that, just try again. So a little snip, and then what you should find is you can just fold this out, and this is just a little cartouche there known as. So you can make lids for pans and all sorts of things with this, so very, very useful thing to know. Then this should be the right size just to line the bottom of your tin, and that will definitely stop things sticking. But what we also need is one for the top. So I've already got mine prepared, so I can fold that out, and that needs to be a little bit bigger than your tin, so we've got edges to fold in. So water's come up to the boil, my tin's ready to go, and its little kind of paper top. When your chard leaves go in, you can put a pinch of salt in that water. Make sure it's up to the boil, otherwise it's going to happen too slowly and you'll take the colour out of them, and that's not what we're looking to do. We're looking to keep colour in there. That's why we cook them first. It might sound a little bit strange to cook something first and cook it again and you're going to keep colour, but if you don't blanch these they'll just dehydrate in the oven and go really grey and lose that lovely colour that we've got from the vein in the leaf. So of course some of mine have got red veins, and then I've got just one with a little kind of yellow vein in there as well. So take your leaves into the hot water and just make sure they're fully submerged. And they'll only take seconds, so you'll see them once they've just started wilting down a little. That's when they're ready to come out. So with this you can actually like strain them through a strainer, otherwise I'm just going to use some little tongs to lift them straight into the water. But now what you should see is these are just a lot less rigid. Into that cold water, getting rid of any excess hot water, otherwise you'll take the temperature up of the cold water. Yeah, so just leave those and they're ready to go. So it's always, when you're cooking, about staying that little step ahead. We don't want to be ready on things before I kind of need them, or I'm ready for stuff and then I'm waiting for other things. So these are now ready for when our vegetables are poached. So this pan that I've used to cook that chard within, with that water, we can just discard that. And then, as I'm a pretty lazy cook, not really, but what I don't really like to do is create washing up. So what I could do is get another pan to cook the vegetables in. Now what's the point? I've already got a pan here and it's only had water in it, so it's clean and ready to go. So now we'll come on to our knife skills. So whenever it comes to using a knife, and especially on a chopping board, make sure it's nice and clear. So you can see I've got tongs in the way, move those out of the way. When it comes to prepping the vegetables, what we're doing is moving the vegetables while I go, so never get in your own way because you'll end up kind of stabbing yourself. Then what I'm going to do is use some of these lovely Zwilling knives that we work with here at the cookery school. Now the correct way to hold it is with these two fingers, and it's called a pinch grip. Yeah, if you hold it on the knife there and these fingers just curled around, your arm will be nice and relaxed and your knife will be nice and stable. Then when it comes to work on a chopping board, if you stand straight with your knife on the diagonal, you open your shoulder out and you just keep yourself nice and comfortable. So kind of all of the courses that I teach here at the school, I'll perhaps bring this into everything, because I think this is a crucial thing to know for everyday cooking. You'll be using, I use this practically every time I cook. Yeah, there's not a lot I don't use a knife for. Otherwise, you don't need to use a knife, and you could turn to something like a grater. And if you just grate the vegetables, that'll also work well. You can use things like mandolins for certain vegetables, spiralisers if you really want to. But I think for me, being a chef for the last 20 years, if I can pick one of these up, you give me any reason, I'd much prefer to work with a knife. So stand at that board, and then the correct way of using it on the board is with a little push through action. So the knife never lifts up, and it always just glides forward. Yeah? So you're pushing through, and it's like a little bit of a piston. If your knife's nice and sharp, you'll create some sawdust on the chopping board, and maybe some on the knife, so just get rid of that. Then the vegetables that I'm going for, like I say, this is very flexible. So here at Daylesford, it's all about seasonality. So I can make this all year round, yeah, especially with our beautiful chard leaves that just keep going. They're very, very hardy. They're one of our kind of favourite winters. And this time of year they try and flower quite a lot. But we've got all sorts to use. So I've got some lovely little baby carrots. I'm going to be using an onion today because our shallots aren't quite ready yet. They're more like a spring onion at the moment. I've got this weird little courgette. Yeah, how amazing is that? And it's always great working with these varieties that you don't see very often. And that's another advantage to having this 20 acres of market garden where you've got beautiful stuff to keep going and pulling out of the ground. Just don't tell Jazz, he might tell me off. Then I've got leeks, I've got a little bit of bulb of fennel. I don't know if anyone's kind of come across this stuff before, but there's a little bit of an aniseedy taste to it. So it's not for everybody, but it's definitely for me. And it's a lovely texture, we get a nice crunch from this as well. Then another thing that I've got, and I don't know who's managed to see one of these beautiful things before, this is something called Kohlrabi. It's a beautiful root vegetable. This one's quite young, it's still got like a little leaf on the top of it. And that was just because another tutor that I worked with grabbed it for me. Yeah? So I will work with this. Now this one will definitely need peeling. So if I just take off the bottom, and then you can use a vegetable peeler and it's less wasteful. And then with this, because I don't need much for this dish, I'm just going to take a little bit from around the bottom. And then if you work onto the chopping board, you don't end up with really kind of a dirty surface around you, so nothing too big to clean up at the end of things. So getting rid of these little kind of peelings, and all this will go back into our market garden. It just gets composted. Feed those lovely worms that are looking after the soil. Then if I take this kohlrabi, and I'm just going to take a couple of slices. It's me saying about this knife action, this one's a little bit too tall for that, so I can't keep the knife on the board. I'm in a really awkward position. So you step the knife up and use it the same. So I'll come down and do just a few little slices, and then of course I've got some of that left for the next dish that I do, or I might pickle it. Then with these little slices, if I had a lot of slices, what you do is fan them out like this, lay them on your chopping board, and you can just work your way down it. So slow and steady wins the race with this new knife skill that you've learned. Yeah? And then once you've had practice, what you can be doing is looking at a camera while you're going and going pretty quickly. But then you end up with these lovely little strips that are known as julienne, yeah, or it's like a matchstick. And you can do this with all sorts of vegetables. So there's one of the vegetables already chopped. Now, because I'm using baby carrots, what I'm finding is I'll probably struggle to do something like this. So I might do this slightly differently. And then with my carrots, because that skin's edible, the highest concentration of nutrients are just underneath the skin. So if I go and peel the skin off, I'm getting rid of the highest concentration, so I don't want to do that. So definitely don't bother peeling your carrots. You shouldn't really need to. And especially from lovely kind of organic soil. You can see this has been washed. Trust me, it didn't look anything like that when it came out of the ground. It was covered in soil. So if you take your carrot, yeah. Now if you've got a nice big fat one, you can chop it, I don't know, into 1.5 inches, 2 inches. Then chop it into little strips and turn it into this. Otherwise, if we take it, I'm going to go down the middle, and that way it's just opened out into two halves. But now what I've got is a flat edge. Now with the flat edge, that'll always be the bit that sits on the chopping board. That way things are just nice and stable and it doesn't really want to move around on me. And then if we just shred through this, nice fine slices, and then if your knife's on the diagonal and the food isn't, it actually ends up just presenting really nicely because it's cut on a little bit of an angle. We open up the surface area so it cooks a little bit faster. Yeah, and you see you just end up with these lovely little pieces of carrot. Now if you've managed to cut them as thin as I have, then that means they're going to cook very fast. So getting rid of any little bits that are going into the compost. Then if I take a little bit of leek, so I'll show you how to turn this into the julienne. Now if you've ever noticed in leek how sometimes you get a little hard core within it, and it's a little white core that comes through. Yeah, you can see it's quite rigid. I say it's white because when you get into it you'll really see that. This is actually the flour starting to form and come up through the leek. So if you've got any of this in there, especially this time of year while the sun's been out, you definitely just want to get rid of that. And then you're left with this kind of piece of leek that's in half. You can make it easy for yourself by splitting that into two pieces. Then if you take your leek, and I actually leave this on its curve, and then I will roll it as we chop through. Yeah, you see you just end up with these beautiful little matchsticks again. Yeah? Then same again with the other bit. Yeah, so I don't know if you're finding this quite as easy as I am, but I've had a lot of practice. So there's 3 vegetables already done. The more practice you get with a knife, the quicker this gets and the easier it gets. So fennel, I'll chop that in half. Now I've got some lovely little kind of fronds, these are known as, from the top, and I'll save these and chop these later. So just snip off that little top end. Then within the fennel you've got a core that's attached to the root, and you'll need to get rid of that. And I find it easier if once it's in half, we go into quarters. Then once you've got this kind of quarter, I'll go in, and then that whole core is removed, and we'll get rid of that. Then of course I'm left with this that actually it's already a little bit shredded. It's like an onion in layers. So now I'll take that and shred through again. Now of course the more vegetables you get in your diet, the better. So with all this kind of health trend going on at the moment, with people kind of supplementing the food with all sorts of things, I feel like when you eat a selection of vegetables like this, you don't have to be that concerned about it. So just the more vegetables you get in your diet, the better your diet is. So that was the courgette that I've just taken a few slices off as well. Now if this has got a bit of moisture, so it might stick to your knife, so just be careful when getting it off. Then with this I'll do the same, just lay it out like a little bit of a fan. And then we'll just shred through this one again. So all of these vegetables that will be going into this julienne. Now if you've got the vegetables that were on your ingredients list, perhaps you haven't got quite as many as me to do. So maybe I'm making it a bit more difficult for myself. So now I've got like 2 real fundamentals of cooking. So these are used as, I say, seasoning in a lot of food. So what happens when you cook onions and garlics and a lot of these other allium is these really go sweet. And of course when you sweeten your food, it is actually a form of seasoning. So we're looking to kind of soften these down and sweeten them nicely. So with your shallot, it'll be exactly the same anatomy as an onion, but of course my onion is about 8 times bigger. So I'll take my onion or shallot, and instead of trying to peel it first, because I'm going to shred it anyway, I just feel like that's a waste of time. So if you take it, and we're just going to cut it down the middle, then with this little sprouting end that comes out the ground, I'll snip that off, and just get that into my vegetable waste. And then the little root end that's within here is very, very tough, and it doesn't soften during the cooking process. So with that little root, we're going to take it off in just a little bit of an angle, so it's 45 degrees into the onion, and then you'll find you've removed that whole tough bit of root, but not wasted all the onion that was above it. Now, of course, now it's prepped, it should be very easy to get the skin off. So the skin should just peel away. Then you are looking for this first layer of onion at the top to be nice and shiny and nice and glossy. Now, just at my edge here, you probably can't see on the camera, it's not looking as shiny and glossy, it's looking a little bit yellow. So that means this top layer has also started forming into skin, which means that that won't soften properly and it'll be a bit tough. So I will remove that. Now, this is just handy, this has been left behind. Sometimes you'll be left with membrane. Just get rid of that too, it'll cause your knife to slip on it, so just put that to one side. Now, a question I quite often get asked during courses is, how do I stop myself crying when I chop an onion? Use a sharp knife and use it properly, and you don't crush the onion, so you shouldn't cry. Yeah, I can't guarantee that, but that's one of the best ways I find. So when we slice our onion into little strips, your onion's got lines that run from top to bottom, and that is the correct way of slicing it. So looking to slice along the lines. You haven't got to hit the lines, but just in that direction. And that way when we cook it, it'll all cook at the same time as each other. If you turn your onion around this way and slice through that way, which is when you end up with the little arches, all the arches cook at different times. So some will be ready and some will be raw. So take your shallot, which you've probably got if you've got the ingredients that we told you to bring, then just shred through and try and get it as uniform as you can. That's what it's all about when it comes to chopping your vegetables, is just getting them uniform. Yeah? So even if they're not as thin as mine, yeah? Just all the same size as each other. Yeah? Nicely shredded. Then when it comes on to your kind of bulb of garlic, I find it easier to get rid of the skin if this little bit that sticks out the ground, that's gone quite papery and quite tough. If you give that a pull and a twist, some skin comes away with it, and then you should just be able to access one of these cloves. The easiest way to get the skin off the clove is if down the end of the board closest to you, you put your knife onto it and just give it a gentle tap. Then that skin should become loose and just fall away. So just discard the skin because that won't soften. If there's a little hard core down here, that's still just part of the root, and you should find that just pulls away with your finger. Otherwise you can snip it off with your knife. So now what I'll do with this is I'll crush it. So if I take my knife, again, exactly the same, on the garlic, and then with a flat hand, you're just going to hit it once and nice and firm. Yeah? So nobody's squeezing on it, because if anything slips, you'll cut into the palm of your hand. Then, now my garlic is vaguely crushed, so it's already part way there. Then if we go through and chop it, then with this little bit of chopped garlic, it's not quite as chopped as I'd want it to be, so you can turn it 90 degrees and chop through it again. So what my aim here is, a little bit like with using the pan for the second time and not washing up, this will save me taking out one of the garlic clove crushers, but feel free to use one of those if that's what you're confident using. So now my garlic's chopped, I'm okay to use that, I don't need to take it any further, but I think when you teach people to cook, you've got to teach them as much as you can in one little video, yeah, or one little cookery class. So now we're going to take some salt, and this will be the same every time you see me use salt. I'm using sea salt flakes, so natural salt, no anti-caking agents, yeah, but it's a little bit coarse, so it's going to give things something to grind against when I use it for this. So I'm going to take a pinch that's not as much as the garlic, but it's a good pinch and quite generous. So you should see there's plenty sat on top of the garlic. Then with it being coarse salt, it gives your knife something to grind against, and salt draws moisture out of things, so I should be able to turn this into really sticky garlic puree very easily. So take your knife again, garlic at the end of the board closest to you, it's got to be, otherwise you can't get your knife flat. Yeah? If you do it over here on the board, you'll find your knife's up in the air and it won't go flat because your hand's in the way. So your pressure's on with this hand, and you're going to drag the knife towards you. Yeah, just doing little sections at a time and keep working your way across. And you should find that you just end up with a really sticky garlic puree. Yeah? So you should see this is shining quite nicely. And then you can see it on the knife and it'll just stick to it. So the great thing when you use garlic like this is you're less likely to burn it because it's sat in its own juices. So I just think it's a nice thing to know. I don't always do my garlic like that, but for this dish I definitely think it works. So now turning back to our saucepan, we're going to preheat it a little bit. Working on induction, pretty easy to preheat it. Then I've got a little bit of butter, so I'm going to take like a decent sized knob, and then because I'm a chef I've got to add another one. Then this is going to add a lot of flavour to your food. Now if you've got someone who's kind of lactose intolerant, don't feel like you need to use butter, you can use a cooking oil, you can use coconut oil, you can use anything you want, but you need fat in the pan, and the fat conducts the heat into the food. So if we don't put fat in the pan, this won't work, it won't cook. Yeah? All that will happen is it'll go black on the outside and it'll still be raw. So we're using a lovely natural fat, one that our bodies have evolved to digest, which is why I'm sticking to butter from some lovely organic cows. Then I'm just going to take all of these vegetables in one go. So I might drop my garlic in first because that's sticky, I don't just want to grab it with my hands. And then the rest of them will just get dropped in. So another thing we teach at the cookery school is about seasoning. So a lot of people think that seasoning is salt and pepper, and that's not strictly true. So it's not the fact that I don't add pepper to food, because I've just added some. But with the pepper I actually add a flavour and I don't season. When you add salt, this is seasoning, because what it does is enhance the flavour of all of the food in here, and it will pull all of these flavours out. Now it's also quite important that you get this in the pan early, and now the salt's starting to pull the flavour out. So you've already seen what it did to the garlic on the chopping board. So it's going to keep doing the same in the pan, just drawing moisture out of things and drawing flavour out. So another way we can kind of season is with our other flavour profiles. So I've got sweet, which is going to come from sweating down the vegetables. Sour, I'm not going to use in this dish. Bitter, also not in this dish. But if we kind of char grill vegetables, that's when you add a bitter tone and it's really, really delicious. Salty, you've obviously already seen that go in. And then I wonder if any of you have heard the word umami. So this umami is this pleasant savoury taste, it's known as our fifth taste. Now if I want to add umami to this dish, all I do is keep my pan on a nice high temperature and you colour the vegetables. So it's also not strictly necessary for this, because we've got so many other flavours going on with it that I don't really need that umami to give it a lick too much. So just watching these vegetables don't catch for me. If you get a little bit of colour on there, there's nothing wrong with that. Like I say, that'll add umami, so that's a good thing. And then, I don't know if you can still hear me kind of shouting over the sizzle of the pan, but this is a happy pan. It's making a lot of noise, but it's not spitting and it's not crackling. If it's spitting and crackling, you just need to turn it down a little bit. The smoke coming off the pan, turn it down, so this is just steam coming out of the vegetables. So now, because I've got my pan on a nice strong heat and there's plenty of warmth in there, this is when you think for pan cookery, I'll stay in control, I'll turn it down a little bit, but I still need it to keep making noise. If it doesn't make noise, I need to turn it back up again. If your pan dries out and there's not really any kind of fat left behind, what I look for is when I look in the pan, all of these vegetables in contact with the pan should be bubbling slightly. If they're not, and I can see dryness anywhere, this is when I'll keep turning to, I just need a bit more fat. Yeah? So same again, I'll go in with another knob of butter, yeah, maybe another knob of butter again, and that'll just keep these cooking nicely and softening down. So if you chop your vegetables nice and thin, yeah, it doesn't matter how long they are, it just matters on the thickness, then what happens is you end up with nice soft vegetables very, very quickly. So yeah, learning knife skills as part of cooking I think is quite crucial. Yeah? But if you've used a cheese grater, yeah, a nice coarse one, they will have been cooked a couple of minutes ago. So now I'm pretty happy that my vegetables have softened. So now I'll turn into making a little bit of a sauce just to hold these things together. So I'm going to be using a little bit of creme fraiche. Now creme fraiche is a cultured double cream, yeah, rather than yoghurt that's cultured milk. So when you use this cultured double cream, we can cook it and it won't go thin. Yeah? So don't use yoghurt for something like this, because as soon as it hits heat it turns almost to water. So use this. If you've not got creme fraiche, just use some double cream. Yeah? And then I don't know if you saw, like I used quite a generous tablespoon. And that is just to bring this together, so I've got a little bit of sauce going on. Now you can also thicken creme fraiche by boiling it. So if I boil it, I'll make this into a nice tight sauce. Yeah, so I've got a little bit of heat in there, and I just want this to thicken very, very slightly. Yeah, so a little bit of heat, it's bubbling away, and we're just looking for the texture to change. You almost see the bubbles getting thicker. So now I've ended up with, you can see there's nothing kind of pouring off it. I'm pretty happy with that. We can turn our heat off. And then the seasonal cheese that I've kind of chosen is we make one here on the farm from cow's milk, and our brand team have thought of a great name for it. Greek style cheese. Alright, maybe it's not a great name, but what it is, made by our cheesemaker Peter, is absolutely delicious. And this is very much like feta, yeah? We can't call it feta because feta's protected and it needs to be made out of different milk, not cow's milk. But this, I find, will add a lovely little salty tone. Otherwise, if you wanted to like cube some cheddar and add it, it'll work really well. If you've got a mozzarella that's quite dry, that can work, but you'll just find it's a little bit stringy. But otherwise, try loads of cheeses in here. Blue cheese would work phenomenal as well, especially where you'll finish in the dish with some walnuts. So with this, I'll just roughly break it, yeah? So I don't need it in tiny little pieces. As I stir it, it's going to break down anyway. And then what I think is also crucial while you're cooking is to be tasting your food. It doesn't matter how many times I've eaten this cheese, I think I still need to try a little bit.
Do you have to be quite careful with the salt content in the feta and how much you add before you add the feta? How much salt you add before the feta?
Definitely. So if you go in with a lot of salt, then what will happen is this whole dish will end up quite salty. But you saw that pinch of salt I put at the beginning. Now I don't know if it looks like a lot to people when I go in with a pinch of salt. This isn't table salt. So table salt is extremely salty, and if I put a pinch like that in my hand, I'll be looking at about 2 grams. With this sea salt flakes that I'm using, it's very light, it's not salty, it's almost got a taste of the sea, it's like it's got a bit of a sweetness to it. And if I weighed that, it'd be about 0.5 gram. So when you see chefs kind of seasoning, quite often we're seasoning for a lot of people, but what we're also using is a nice kind of natural salt. So yeah, just it is about lifting the flavour of the vegetables though, so if you don't put the pinch of salt in there, the vegetables aren't going to taste as good as they can do. So just discard that little bit I was showing you with, any bits left on my hand, just get in there. Now we can fold this through. Now also the egg within this dish is kind of optional. Yeah, especially if you've reduced that creme fraiche, then you've already made this quite a tight sauce. But what your vegetables do when they cook and kind of steam in the oven is they lose a little bit of moisture. So when you use an egg is a binding ingredient. So if you just want to add richness, you can add an egg yolk. If you want more volume, then you can put the whole egg in there. So what I'm going to use is a lovely kind of a brown egg from our Nick's hens that's just off camera. And then of course I've got myself quite a large egg. The chickens are laying large ones at the minute. So I wouldn't say for this mix I need quite that much. But at the same time, what am I going to do with the rest of it? Turn it into the tiniest bit of scrambled egg in the world? Nah. So with this mix, if it's very, very hot, the egg will cook instantly. But as I'm stood here kind of chatting to the camera, this is already cooling down a little bit. So just make sure this isn't boiling hot when the egg goes in. So I'll take my egg. Now what you could do is crack this in a bowl and whisk it all up. Like, what an absolute waste of time that is. And then you've got another bowl to wash up. So that's my whole egg dropped in. And just make sure that you mix this right through all of these vegetables. Now what you could have done first before you put the egg in is tasted it for seasoning, but then the egg does adjust it a little bit. So I prefer to taste it now. Now there might be some of you out there that are a little bit freaked out by that because I'm just about to eat raw egg, but I've got a few friends that bodybuild and they eat raw eggs all the time, and I know where these eggs come from and how fresh they are, so I'm not at all worried about eating raw egg. So with this mix that I've got, it's crucial that we come to taste things. So I've already tasted the cheese, now it's tasting all of this mix together to make sure it's where we need it to be. So that's delicious. I've got real kind of sweetness from the vegetables. That little bit of kind of Greek style cheese is just coming through. I didn't put loads in there. But for me it's still missing something. There's just something not quite kind of popping out. And if ever you're tasting your food and you don't think that's amazing, it just means the seasoning's not quite right. So for this I could add a little bit of warmth. Even if you wanted to go with like a teaspoon of kind of English mustard, that'd really kind of get a little kick in there. I've already put some pepper, but I'm going to put a little bit more. But I think the main thing it was missing was the seasoning. Yeah, so I've already gone in with a pinch of salt. I've used a salty cheese and it's still not where I need it to be. So another pinch of salt, and this is just going to start really making all these flavours kind of pop out. So make sure all that's mixed through nicely. And then I need to taste it again. So just because I've adjusted the seasoning, it doesn't mean I've added enough. Yeah, so always go in for this other taste after adjustments. Now that's completely different. Now I can really taste the egg coming through. Honestly, that last pinch of salt was crucial, really, really crucial.
Isabel's asking, what is the best way to clean up the board after cutting onions and garlic?
So it's a good question, and it's because the onions and garlic can kind of taint the board a little bit, that if you chopped a strawberry on it after, maybe it'd taste like it. What I tend to do here is just use nice hot soapy water. Now I don't know if you've seen me use beautiful kind of wooden boards. These are also made by our knife company Swilling, which is pretty handy to look after the knives. But what these boards also are bamboo. Now these bamboo boards are naturally antiseptic, so they kill bacteria in there. And this board is 8 years old. Yeah, it does a lot of work. I'll prep chicken on it, I'll prep fish on it, I prep vegetables on it, I do everything. And you'll find just that clean with nice hot soapy water, and that's it. The taste doesn't tend to hang around. Yeah, maybe if I'd just crushed garlic, I'd think about chopping my strawberries somewhere else. But otherwise, that should be it. You shouldn't need any stupid chemicals. We don't want to be washing these aggressive chemicals down the sink and into our water systems. So being on an organic farm, that's kind of crucial to us as well, that we're not ruining all our waterways with other things that we use. So I won't use bleach on it or anything like that, just literally hot soapy water. Even at Daylesford we sell some lovely kind of rosemary washing up liquid that smells amazing. And then of course, that's food as well, so if you did take your food with the taste of rosemary in here, it'd be delicious. So, but really good question. Now this is ready to go. I'm also going to add another couple of things. Now there's not much heat in there, so this is pretty good. Now I can turn to some soft herbs. So I don't know if some of you had read this ingredients list and thought, I don't know what you mean by soft herbs. Now soft herbs are the ones with a green stalk, yeah, that's relatively kind of flexible. And these soft herbs are really best for finishing dishes with and not kind of cooking with too much. So if you put this like within a pasta dish, what you'd be doing is you'd cook that pasta, you'd cook the sauce, you'd have brought them all together, and you're going with the soft herbs and finish at the end. You don't cook these too much. But within here, they're protected a little bit, and they're also going to add a lot of flavour. Then what these are also going to add are a lot of nutrients. Yeah? So really, really kind of good for us, just people don't know too much about herbs. Spices as well, and other things, not just really delicious, but incredibly good for you. So the next time you make something like this, maybe think, oh, I will use some spices in there, and you'll just make it taste like a slightly different dish. If I was spicing it up a little bit, maybe then I'd be thinking, oh, I'll turn to some coriander, because coriander would match other things that were going on. But what I wouldn't be doing is putting coriander and feta together. Because when you put coriander and feta in one place, it doesn't make any sense. What you're working with then is two continents on a plate. And if you put two continents on a plate, it's never going to match. It'll just be a little bit weird. And it's the same as the vegetables that I've selected. The vegetables I've selected are all in season. So that means when I put them in a pan, they're all going to go together. Whereas if I was using winter vegetables and summer vegetables at the same time, there's just going to be something a little bit confusing when you eat it. So eat the seasons, and you'll find it easier to bring dishes together. Now, of course, I'm using quite a lot of herbs, but I think here on the farm we've got quite a lot of herbs to use, so you can't really overdo it. So I don't know if you can see how I'm kind of just loosely squeezing these together in my hand. I'm not using like a lot of pressure. This means when I chop it, I'll find it a lot easier, and I'll chop more at the same time. So that was parsley. I've used a little bit of those kind of fennel fronds that were on the top of the fennel. And actually some of that was wild fennel that we've got growing out in the garden as well. So just, it's all squeezed together. Turn back to your knife and just shred through. So when you chop your herbs like this, because the knife's going through them less times, it means they're less likely to get bruised. Yeah? And you never want to bruise your herbs. And of course with this little kind of knife skill that we've gone through today, with it sliding through the food, it means the blade's doing all the work. Whereas if you just go up and down, that's when you're more likely to kind of crush what's in front of you. So herbs go in. And just fold all of that through. Other things that might work to lift this are things like lemon zest would work incredibly well. And then the lemon zest you can also cook. Whereas don't juice a lemon into there, because if you juice the lemon in, that'll end up going bitter while you cook it. So now that everything's kind of ready to go and get dropped in the oven, what I'm going to do is I'll take a little cloth, and that's just to help dry these leaves out a little before we come to use them, because I don't want all this moisture dripping off and into the tart tin. So if you lay them out neatly, yeah, you will have to handle these relatively delicately, because otherwise you'll just end up ripping them. And then I always find, like, if I've done a few more than I need, it's not the worst thing in the world. Yeah, but I mean, the great thing about using chard is you've got this beautiful vein that's really going to kind of show up after, whereas you can just use like a nice large leaf spinach. What I wouldn't do is go and get that baby leaf spinach from anywhere, because it wouldn't work for this dish, it'd all fall apart. So now we've got our leaves. If I just roll them, Yeah? Or you can even use like another cloth on top, and that's just going to help them dry out a little. Then as well, if you are doing this, don't do what I'm doing and leave your knife on a chopping board. It might get hidden underneath it and you grab it in a minute. So now we've got rid of a lot of that moisture. Yeah, so it's not about wringing them out. Then we're going to take our tin, and if we lay on our leaves, now I think for me the presentation side will be the front side of the leaf, so where the veins don't poke out. On the other side you can see how this big vein in the middle is like quite rigid, so this is when I'll think I'll put it this way round, and then when we turn it out, this is the bit that's shown. Then I've used what I thought was my most attractive one to sit right in the bottom, because that's the one that will be getting presented the most. Then all we need to do is, with our other leaves, is start building up so that we've got something to kind of fold things into. If your leaves are massive, you might only find that you need 2. But what you'll do is, if you use like quite a few leaves, it'll be more of a solid structure to hold things together as well. So I've ended up using 4 moderate size ones. Then with that, I've now got something that I can fill, and I should have enough to kind of fold everything over, although let's just put an extra one for luck. Then taking our mix, yeah, making sure that when you do this, that not one person's going to get all the cheese out of the pan or someone else is just going to get vegetables. It's making sure there's literally like, you've got a little bit of everything for everybody. Then I'm not looking to overfill it, so I don't want it higher than the tin, but I do want it about the same level. And of course, I don't know how many you're all making. Maybe you're doing a few, maybe you're doing one massive one. So now we've got this, we're just looking to fold everything in. You don't need a lot of pressure, yeah? And don't pull on things, because if you pull, you'll end up pulling leaves from underneath as well. So just folding over, yeah? Any little bits of leaf getting left behind, we can turn to that in a minute. Yeah, but you can see we're starting to bring together this nice, neat little parcel. Yeah? I'm putting a little bit of pressure just to kind of firm things up a little. And then here, if we take our little piece of greaseproof, and then you can tuck it into the tin. So you might struggle to do this. So what I'll tend to do is, especially I've got like a lovely rigid little bit of core there, so that'll help me pinch in the first side. And then you can either use like the back of a spoon, yeah, or the handle, just to help this get tucked in. Now the reason why we're doing this is just to stop the tart completely dehydrating while it's in the oven. I don't always do this, but I think it's a nice little trick to know. Yeah, just going around and neatly get the edges in. If you need to pull it around a little bit and then push it in. If you're finding that that is very rigid and you can't really do it, then just lift it off for a second. Don't start getting angry with the food. This is another thing I see in the kitchen quite a lot, is people getting a bit frustrated with things. Like, don't do that, right? It's not going to win. If you take this and run it under a cold tap, it actually softens it quite a lot and just wring the water off, and then you might find it a little bit easier. Otherwise, if you've got too much paper, maybe just trim off a little bit of that edge again. But don't be getting wound up in the kitchen, yeah? It's just a bit of food. If it goes into the oven without it, it is not the worst thing in the world. So now we've got our oven on 150, but it's not too hot a temperature, so we're not going to kind of colour anything. Now once we hit 160, that's when we'll start adding colour to things. So that's when you turn on to a roasting temperature. So this is almost a slow cooking temperature, whereas of course 150 is hot enough to do this quite fast. And then we're cooking egg, so cooking egg at 150 is going to stop it puffing up too much as well. So now just turning back to our stove, and we're doing something that's, I don't know, possibly a little bit dangerous in the kitchen, and that's making a caramel. Yeah, so I don't know if anyone's kind of tried that before. Now the caramel that we're making today, we're making with honey, so that actually makes it a little bit easier, because when you make it with sugar, you need to dissolve the sugar first, then turn the heat up. So a lot of people go a little bit wrong when they come to making caramel, because they're using sugar on just a very, very high heat. With your honey though, it's easier because it's less likely to crystallise, but it's also incredibly dangerous. If you get this on your skin, it will be the worst burn you've ever had. Yeah? You can touch an oven door and it will not burn as much as this. Yeah? So I cannot stress enough, do not, however tempting it is, stick your finger into the caramel when you've just made it. So what I'm going to do is, if I take, and I'm using a shallow pan for this because I think it's going to be easier for you to kind of see what's going on in here. Use that cloth that had my chard in, it only had a bit of water just in case there was anything splattered out my other pans. Then what we do need is a strong heat. There's no messing around. So if you're working with gas, it's turned up full. Yeah? If you're working on induction like I am, I suppose it depends on your induction, but I'm on number 12 on this AEG one. It goes 13, 14 and power after that, so that's incredibly hot. So perhaps your window between it being perfect and burnt is so short that I've turned it down just a little bit. But like I say, if this was gas, it'd just be on full. It needs to be a strong heat. So it's not about getting your pan preheated, it's just because I'm talking that's happened. So now I'm going to take, I don't know, a tablespoon of this kind of relatively runny honey. We do keep bees here, so we've got some incredible honey that I can be using off the farm. Then if this was caramel that we were making with sugar, you wouldn't be going anywhere near it with a spoon, yeah? Whereas with honey, we're alright. Yeah? So the reason why I need a spoon for this anyway, because we're going to be turning our walnuts over in it. But this needs to be boiling hard. And it's just going to start to change colour, and that's when we know that it's getting close to turning to caramel. Another thing that will really help is your sense of smell. So using your senses in the kitchen are incredibly important. I've already mentioned the sizzle of a pan, so of course that's using our ears. It's not just about your eyes in the kitchen. It's definitely not about your sense of touch, because you'll just end up burnt. So I don't know if you can see in this pan how this is bubbling away nicely. It reduces and I end up with a little bit less. So here, I mean, that's quite a lot of walnuts. I won't be using all of these, but you can just drop some of these in, not doing it from a distance and not throwing them hard. And just while this caramel kind of finishes off, these nuts will toast a little bit as well. So, as like a chef for the last 20 years, I'm able to just spin it over in the pan without too much of a problem. Don't try that at home if you're not any good at it, because if you splat yourself with any of that honey, like I say, it's going to be a horrendous burn, and A&E will be getting in touch with me tonight. So that honey's just started going a little bit darker. Yeah, this is what we're looking for. So what you can do now, that honey's started darkening, it's bubbling nicely, is just turn it down a little bit, and then you just open up this window between it being ready and burnt. Yeah? Now my sense of smell's telling me it's also getting pretty close. The colour's a lot darker than what I started with a minute ago. So what this will do to the honey is it will help it set. So here we can see our walnuts are getting nicely coated. The bubbles on that honey have almost kind of disappeared. They're just very, very fine. That's also showing that a lot of moisture's gone out of it as well. So now the walnuts are just toasted a little bit and you can smell them. They smell absolutely delicious. So that umami I was talking about has come through from the nuts. Then here, that silicone paper that I'd kind of mentioned in your ingredients is also down. And that is to turn these onto. Now this is the same, if you've not got this silicone kind of reusable paper, you just use some baking parchment or greaseproof paper. And you just lift the walnuts out of the honey, because they're nicely coated. So you can see that 1 tablespoon goes quite a long way. I've got all of these coated and I've still got little traces left in the pan. So you can give those more of a coating just by dotting it lightly onto the walnuts. Then do not touch these. Yeah? So in here today, I knew I was doing this and I knew I was doing it on camera. So what I've got is my aircon turned on, so these are going to set very quickly, and I've got air conditioning blowing right on top of me now. Now another thing a lot of you are going to hate me for, especially if you do your own washing up, is that pan. Yeah? So you cannot clean this with hot soapy water. Yeah? It's just absolutely ridiculous. It's just like nothing happens. It just rips apart your scourer, rips apart your sponges, because everything sticks to it. There's only one way to clean this, and that is get some water, and you think I'm having a laugh at the minute, because what's happened now is that honey's gone rock solid. It's a hard caramel, not a soft caramel. Then the only way to clean this is with heat and that water. So once your water's up to temperature, then this honey will just dissolve in it, and there's no scrubbing the pan anymore. It'll already be clean. So I'll do this in front of you just so you can see how kind of quickly it happens. Yeah? So nice strong heat again, so I can bring my water up to the simmer, and all of this sugar that was stuck on the pan just dissolves. But I've heard of many people that have thrown pans in the bin after doing stuff like this. Do not do that. Yeah? Hot water. Even if you run it under a hot tap, it will go eventually. But if you run it under a hot tap, then you're wasting quite a lot of water. Yeah, so I don't know if you can see how the water's gone a caramel colour. It actually smells delicious. Yeah? It's not going to taste like much because I've already watered it down. Otherwise, what I could have done was made like a little caramel sauce out of it. If I took some double cream and a whisk, yeah, and poured in, I don't know, to that amount, say 200 mils of double cream, and then you'll pour that in and think I'm joking again because everything starts setting, and just whisk at the same time, you'll end up with like a honey caramel sauce that is also delicious. It wouldn't work with this dish though. I'd serve that with something sweet. But then the next time you're doing something sweet that you think would work well with lovely kind of caramelised walnuts and a caramel walnut sauce, that's what you're going to do. So now the water's come up to the boil, I've stirred it around a little bit, and what you end up with is a clean pan.
So James, if you wanted to make individual versions of this dish like you are, if you wanted to prep them for a dinner party, would that be easy, and then you've got them ready on the tray and they could just go in when you're ready, just before you're ready to serve? Or do you think they're best made fresh?
Definitely not. So if you're doing it for a dinner party, you do this like a couple of days in advance. Like, don't worry about that at all. And that's actually a really good thing to do. So this is something that maybe we'll bring onto something like our dinner party courses. And when we do the dinner party courses here, we talk a lot about what's done in advance. When you're running a dinner party, do not make things difficult for yourself. And then of course something like this makes a delicious starter, yeah? And quite an elegant looking starter as well. When we turn it out, we should see that, hopefully, yeah? But otherwise, serve it as a side for something, and it will work with anything. A little bit of fish, not with the cheese, but leave the cheese out, and it's going to go great with fish. But otherwise with chicken, with beef, with lamb, with pork, it just keeps working all day long. It's just delicious vegetables, and that is the most important thing, yeah? just this will keep working all day long. And like I say, the recipe's really flexible. The vegetables just swap out. As long as you've got these chard leaves, and especially for this time of year, now it's warming up a little bit, so we've called this a pie in the past, yeah? Maybe I don't like calling it that too much because it hasn't got pastry, but this is the perfect thing to think about. It's like at this time of year when I don't want to eat something heavy and covered in pastry, I can make something like this instead, and then I've just used vegetables and like a delicious bit of dairy. So now we're ready with the walnuts, and you should see that these have set already. Now the reason why we do this and put it on something we can turn it off is because our caramel sets, is they're not going to stick to each other, yeah, and they're not going to set in the pan, yeah. So if you just left them in the pan, it just sets solid. Now if you did do that and you've ended up a little bit stuck, don't worry, just put the pan on at like a moderate heat, and that honey will just start to soften again, and that's when it's perfect. Everything will just be able to lift off and then let it set again. So walnuts ready to go, our parcels in the oven. So we've put kind of salad leaves on there. So what I'm going to turn to is I've got some delicious rocket, and I've picked some relatively young leaves, and I've got some mustard frills that I can turn to as well.
Will the honey caramel set as hard as a sugar caramel, or will it be a bit softer?
No, it'll set as hard. It depends how far you've taken it though. So if you've not taken it quite far enough, it doesn't go quite as firm. Yeah. Now a sugar caramel, you can probably take it so you can break your teeth on it. Yeah, but this isn't too far off. I've just snapped that in my fingers. I'm not going to start crunching on camera. Oh God. You probably won't be able to hear that, but it's really crisp. Oh God, and absolutely delicious. And it's just got more flavour than a sugar caramel. So especially if you use things like white sugar is probably the most boring sugar you can buy. It doesn't taste like anything. It's just sweet, one-dimensional, and just boring. Yeah. This is why I turn to stuff like honey, or even if you use a brown sugar. Now here on the farm, because we can only use organic, I can't even buy white sugar. Yeah. There's no such thing as organic white sugar. So this is when we turn to a golden sugar, and you see that as golden caster sugar or golden granulated, and you can buy that organically because it's unrefined. Yeah? So here, now like I say, I'm turning to, because I've got some delicious mustard frills, yeah, I've got some kind of relatively baby rocket leaves. Now here's the same, I'm just going to save on the washing up, because I don't really like washing up, and once this camera's turned off I'll have to do that simple. So I can dress these, and I can just dress it in my hands. I don't really need to kind of get a bowl out, I don't need to get a whisk and make a little salad dressing, but otherwise I'll just squeeze on like a little bit of lemon and a little bit of olive oil. But I think the first thing to do is take our little parcel out. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, I'm using the same cloth as I did for the chard. Don't do that. Yeah? All that means is this cloth's a little bit damp, and if you take stuff out the oven with a damp cloth, the cloth warms up because there's water in it. So now, what I'm looking for is just take off that little lid. This should be kind of relatively set because of the egg in there, but otherwise, if it does let out a little bit of juice or a little bit of sauce, brilliant, it's like a self-saucing dish. So now when it comes to getting this tin, you can turn it out onto a chopping board, but then you'll need like a little kind of spatula to pick it up. I find one of the easiest ways to do it is straight onto the plate, yeah? But maybe this isn't for everyone. So if we take our plate, and you have got to be confident if you do this, there's no messing around. If you're a little bit hesitant, things will slip. So just over in one nice smooth action, and it's done, yeah? So like I say, it needs to be smooth, otherwise things are going to slip off the plate. Then don't use your fingers. Yeah? Then of course we can get rid of that tip. If there was any moisture and that little bit of water there, I don't know if you can see it clearly on the plate, but that little bit of water's just come off the chard. So always, especially we've already spoke about dinner parties, if you were hosting a dinner party, I'm not going to be serving something with juice all around the plate. So you're just looking to clean that up nicely. Then if you do want this to present beautifully as well, what you can also do is if you take a little bit of extra virgin oil, then of course with this tin that I'm using it's not got a great drizzler, so you can use your finger to cause that. Just so you get a tiny drizzle. Best tools in the kitchen, your hands. Yeah, you keep seeing me like wash mine tonight. Keep them nice and clean and then you can do stuff like this. And then what you should see then, from that little bit of oil, is suddenly it's popping out and it's shining. I've got that lovely vein from that first leaf that I put down. So it is, whenever you're putting dishes together or forming things, think when it comes out of whatever you've cooked it in, what's it going to look like? And you can make it present best by putting thought into it first. So like I say, we can take, this is mustard frills. I've got some rocket leaves, and you can make these shine as well with the little bit of oil. You want to add a little bit of zing, use something like a little kind of squeeze of lemon juice on there, and just loosely roll them in your hands, and now they're dressed. So when it comes to eating salad leaves, what these have got in them are lots of nutrients, but the nutrients don't absorb into your body properly if you don't eat them with fat. So you'll find when you dress salad leaves, they're actually more nutritious. Yeah, so always think about doing this. Then what you can do is if you hold them as a little bit of a ball in your hand, then you can get them to present on the top and kind of pop on the plate. Otherwise, if you wanted to get a little bit more modern, yeah, or perhaps show off that beautiful leaf, then you can go along and just drop them on the plate as they're individuals. Yeah. Maybe with the rocket you can rip that a little and spread it out. Yeah. So I mean things like this are completely up to you. This would be more, I'd be thinking dinner party if I was arranging stuff on a plate, but for me what I love is salad, so that wouldn't be enough. So I definitely think of doing a little kind of pile on top. Then with your walnuts, these have a kind of great crunch. You can leave them whole and put them around, or you can snap them a little and then you kind of help people out of the table. And whenever it comes to presenting things, you're always looking to present it in an odd number and it will look a lot more attractive.
So James, Layla's just asking, if you were to serve this as a dish with fish, what would you use for the filling instead of the cheese?
So I wouldn't, I'd just take the cheese out, like don't worry about that. It's only because cheese and fish aren't the best two things in the world. Now I'm pretty sure there's the odd person out there that disagrees with that. I've certainly eaten some fish pasta dishes with a little sprinkling of parmesan. They do things like cod mornay, which is like a cheese sauce on cod. That's actually quite nice as well. But I think typically when it comes to using fish, don't put cheese anywhere near it. It's just not brilliant. If you look for fish and cheese recipes online, I bet you won't find too many. But otherwise, these vegetables will work with any fish. Whether it's a lovely piece of salmon on there, or think about a nice kind of crisp skinned bit of sea bass, that will all go with these vegetables. And then if I was using sea bass or salmon, you could make that taste almost oriental. Think about not seasoning it with salt and use something like a little splash of soy sauce or tamari if you know someone that's gluten free. You can use like kind of sesame oil in it or sesame seeds in there. Like honestly, the world's your oyster. If I was doing that, I'd also be putting in like some chilli and some ginger, and you make it a bit more aromatic. So a lot of dishes, the recipe isn't set in stone. It's just like, oh, look what you can make, and then you go like, oh, I wonder what I can do to tweak that, and then try and think about it logically. Like I say, fish doesn't go great with cheese, and then if I was putting sea bass, maybe I'd think, oh, I do want to add more flavour to this, and maybe I would turn it oriental. But literally, the world's your oyster. So I think if you come to spend the day at the cookery school with us, it's all about this. Every dish that we do, I try and show you how flexible things are and and how it's all about the seasons, and it's just how it's all about delicious food. And what you should find when you eat this is you just sat there kind of in heaven a little bit. And I find that here at Daylesford, because the produce is so good that I haven't actually got to do anything with it. I can practically just take raw stuff and put it on a plate and it already tastes incredible. So yeah, use the best ingredients that you can and use the ones in season. The ones in season are cheaper and the ones in season are a lot more tasty. So use your little kind of local farm shop or farmer's market, or if you do have to shop in a supermarket, look for those British flags. The British flags are really, really important. Support the farmers in our country. Yeah, this is what it's about. So what I should do now is shut up, let you enjoy your dish, unless we've got any more questions from anyone else, but I think you should all have a lovely evening.
No more questions so far. Can you just hold it up so we can see exactly what we're looking at? Ah, amazing. Well, thanks so much, James.
No, thank you all very much.
See you soon.
Bye.